Well, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this interview. I'm Project 402. I'm with I've become to call him a friend after the last year or so. I've been helping you with some things and just see you at least twice a month at different meetings. The great and powerful James Houlihan, and he is my guest. He is running for the NRD for this coming election year, and he's going to tell you what that means, tell you why it's important to him. But before we get into the politics and all the nitty gritty, I guess, James, why don't you tell everyone kind of who you are and give them your story? What led you to be where you are right now?
So my name is James Houlihan. I am running for the NRD District Number 9. It is a Papio, Missouri Natural Resources District. So mostly the area that I'll be serving is a portion of Sarpy County and Douglas County, mostly from Center Street over to Giles and 132nd up to 204th, with a small carve out a little bit further up in Sarpy County. But there's basically the NRDs are proportioned to about 42,000 voting residents, and so I've just got a small piece of the larger area that we represent.
42,000 is just the piece that you represent?
Just the piece that I represent.
So you're door knocking all of those to spread the word?
You know, we're going to do our best to knock as many doors, and just for me to be able to introduce myself. You know, name recognition is always important, but ultimately, as I've talked to people before, I decided to run. One of the things they brought up is I always like to meet the candidate. I don't just vote necessarily down ballot or party line. I'd actually like to meet who I'm going to be voting for. So
Right.
My goal is absolutely to get out and meet the people. I'd also like to say, just as that we live in America where we're a republic, and that means that we elect our representatives. So I'm not necessarily going there to speak James Houlihan and what I think has to go. I'm going there to speak what my neighbors want to happen to NRD and how the NRD can affect them.
That's a very good point. So when you were growing up and your family was asking you what you want to do when you grow up, did you say, I want to run for NRD? Or what was the path like getting from, from your job to wanting to run for office? Are you going to keep your job if and when hopefully you get the office? Like what's how do you bring in politics to your life? Because if I'm not mistaken, this isn't your first total introduction to politics. You've been involved in the local party here for a few years, I believe. So yeah, let everyone know kind of your background and how you got into politics and where your love for it comes from.
Well, so we absolutely live in the greatest nation on the earth. And one of the things that allows us to be exceptional is the fact that we can go to our government, petition our government, and change our government peacefully. And that's a big thing for me. When I grew up, I was, my family, we lived on a street and we were kind of isolated from a majority of other families. There wasn't a lot on our street. And it was a dividing line between two school districts. So I remember my dad was in a newspaper. He went to one of the school board meetings during a proposal to decide if our little carved out area could then transition over to the other school district. So that was really my first experience with seeing the normal, everyday neighbors going to their government and requesting a change. And from there was a long pause or silence as I would, just do my normal growing up, get a family for myself, and then realize that I need to step up to help create the America that I want to see and help to preserve the exceptional America that I grew up with.
What ultimately led you to that calling or that passion? I mean, because that's just it's a big leap. Like you said, you took a big pause and you kind of lived a lot of life in between that initial kind of exposure to now. So was it a straight jump, or did you meet someone in a local party here that got you involved, or what was that transition like? Because surely you didn't just do like one jump to the other.
So if you're a family that talks about politics and you talk about politics at the dinner table, then more than likely you also talk about politics with your friends or your neighbors. And so I would have those conversations with a very good friend of mine, and he had been involved in the local party as well. and had always encouraged me to go and join, but I could never find the time. But at some point, when you see the potential for your government to be going in a direction you don't want it to go to, or you see the potential for the government perhaps maybe just spending more money than you think they should, you have to make the time. Time is money. And so by me making the time now to be able to help to support people, to be able to help to eventually get in and reduce property tax, it's money, or it's time well invested.
Yeah. And that's the biggest issue with Nebraska right now, obviously, is property taxes. How could you in your role, if you do get elected, how could you help with that issue? Explain to, I guess, myself, and explain to the viewers what the NRD can contribute to help lower property taxes for our state, because people will often use the expression we're kind of bleeding when it comes to property taxes, especially our farmers in Sarpy County, which is the area which is your jurisdiction, much of Sarpy County.
Yes. So ultimately, the NRD can help two ways. One is help to lower property taxes, but also the main goals of the NRD is flood control, it is soil erosion, and it's water quality. And they can help all three by building the levee system and the dams that they are incorporating. Mm-hmm. By building these systems throughout the counties that it serves, which is Sarpy, Douglas, and Washington, and a little bit of Thurston County, by building out these levee systems and the dam systems, the retention systems, can also reduce a person's flood insurance. And so, for instance, down in Papillion and Bellevue, that a couple of the levees have not passed certification, which means flood insurance has increased for those residents. As the NRD works to recertify the levees, then less or no flood insurance is required for people living in those areas on that floodplain.
Okay.
So those are the two instant ways that the NRD can help reduce the burden of government on its people.
Mm-hmm. Say your jurisdiction again.
So Sarpy, Douglas County, Washington County, and a small portion of Thurston.
Okay. So the 2019 Great Nebraskan Flood, can any of that be attributed to poor NRD decision making in the past, or explain to me, because I honestly don't know. All I heard last year was that levees broke, and obviously combine that with a bunch of rain and snow and then refreezing and melting, and then getting more precipitation. A huge flood happened that was catastrophic.
Very.
I mean, so how does the NRD prevent something like that? Obviously, you can't ever fully, you can't always combat Mother Nature, is what I'm trying to say. But what could have been done better in your eyes, or was that just completely out of the NRD's spot? Was that forces above a position like the NRD?
So it's one of those things where you're juggling a ball. For any government institute, in order to represent the people, they're juggling ideas, they're juggling their budgets and their limits on their budgets. And they're judging, the amount of time it's going to take to incorporate any type of solution that they may have voted on or that the people would agree with. Every insurance is written out. Every insurance contract is written out with the acts of God purview.
Right.
You can't mitigate all risk.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, what happened down at Bellevue and at Offutt, there were a couple of levees where water actually went under the levee, and so that could have potentially been prevented if there's more a robust levee system. There was a couple areas where after it did that, then there was some levee breakage or penetration, so then that allowed flooding. Right. There's also just some areas where the levees just need to be built and built up. But how do you juggle these ideas? When
Sounds
you've
expensive.
It is. It very much is. How do you juggle this when you've got people really struggling, paycheck to paycheck? 80% of America is paycheck to paycheck. Government wants to, through the voting, take more money, take more property tax, and spend in order to fix these things. So there really has to be that checks and balances, and that's one of the reasons why I want to go to the NRD and represent the people for District 9, is to be able to make those decisions on, this is the finite money that we have, what's the best way to administer it, what's going to cause the biggest impact for the citizens. Government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. So really, even the government that we have are ran by citizens. I mean, they're our neighbors, and certainly we can have civic disagreement with anybody in the decisions they've made, how to spend our money, how much money to take from us, how much money to leave for us. It's just your neighbors and your humans making decisions. I want to be one of those decision makers going in and hopefully attacking these problems at as many angles as possible, with as many details and foresight as possible to prevent flooding.
Sure.
And to control spending.
Well, and with your background, and this is something that you could touch on if you want, but I mean, I know you're an accountant, and you also, I think, ran the, you're the, the money manager chair for treasurer. Thank you. I don't know why I can't think. The treasurer, not money manager. The treasurer for the Young Republicans, or was it the whole Douglas County Republican Party?
Yes. So
you're very well qualified, I think, to be in that spot. So do you want to touch on that and kind of feel why you believe that, your background has kind of led, in a way, it's kind of come full circle, and this is almost the perfect position for you?
Absolutely. So I'm a graduate from UNO with an accounting degree.
Go Mavs, me too.
I did not plan on handling taxes, so I did not go the CPA route. I wanted to go into management and management accounting, which is exactly the direction that I went into. Ironically, I ended up doing sales and use tax for about 18 different states for the company I work for. So you can't avoid it.
Right.
It's just one of those things, part of life in when you're running a business or helping to run a business. But I'm an accountant. I was a CFO for a small rural hospital. So I've got a little flavor for Nebraska and the challenges at the hospital where, one, it was a taxing authority. So I was taking money and hopefully managing it well and spending it well as far as I thought.
Sure.
And then now I was also then on my SID, so which is a sanitation improvement district.
Okay, yeah.
So anytime a new development is built, the development and the people who move in there have to pay for the city light or the lights and the electricity, the roads, the sewers,
all the infrastructure.
The infrastructure. And then at some point, potentially it gets purchased by the city.
Sure.
Once the bonds are paid off significantly, and it makes sense for the city to do it, i.e. tax revenue.
Yeah.
But so I'm an accountant, and currently I'm a corporate controller for a construction company, and we have a national footprint. And we build cellular systems inside buildings, hospitals and hotels and convention centers, and so that has allowed me to get an opportunity to look at construction contracts, construction costs, change orders if there are any, what goes into the construction process, and be able to ask the financial questions I have back to our project managers, to make sure that they're fully supported by our corporate, and also that our corporation is fully protected as well.
Well, that makes sense, because a question that I had in my mind that I had to ask you was why NRD, a position that not many people even know what it stands for, let alone knows what it does. Why that position versus legislature, mayor, whatever. But I think that you just kind of answer that. Your background, your life experience totally led you, to this position. It's very fitting.
So not just the construction accounting background, which everything is the Papillion or the Papio, Missouri NRD, they outsource the construction and they outsource the engineering as well to private citizens. And I like that. That's, I think, how government should run. Is government should be for the benefit of the citizens, and the citizens taking the risk to run their own business. But so being able to review the contracts and the multi-million-dollar contracts and see the level of detail and the scope of work that goes into building a system And going out, as I've already gone out and started meeting with their engineers and some of the builders who build the levees and the dams and understand their side of the contract, what they're looking for, as they're partnering and applying their skills and abilities to the NRD as well. Accounting absolutely has every facet, has to do with every facet within the NRD and what I'll be doing on the board as far as reviewing the contracts. But really, it's kind of who I am that makes me a little different, that I do ask the questions. I'm not just a debits and credits kind of guy, that when our engineer is designing our cellular system, that I ask questions about the various costs. Is there an ultimate or a different way to reduce costs? Because we're competing against others. Right. How do we reduce our costs? How do we come in at the perfect spot so we're not leaving money on the table? So I ask questions, and I think that's the biggest advantage. I'm not just going to be a silent person on the board, and that everything that is pushed my way is fed to me and I accept it. But to be able to figure out what questions to ask and ask those questions right back. How are you going to benefit the NRD? Why should we choose your company? What is your competitive advantage that the other company doesn't have? And does it fit this particular project?
That's an important trait just in life, is I wouldn't call it exclusively playing devil's advocate, but just always saying, well, this, we've done it this way for a decade or whatever, however long. Let's examine other options. There's technology always changing. There's new competitors coming in. Let's get some more bids. So yeah, I think that's a very good quality to have, not just for being in politics, but I think for a life skill is people need to realize that everything that is set in place has kind of been set by people just like you and me, at one point in time. So it's good to, challenge maybe that's just a rebel in me coming out, but it's good. It's good in my opinion to challenge or just ask about different ways, to do things to get stuff done.
Well, so I have learned the system. I've learned the parts. I've reviewed the designs. When we go through a bill of materials phone call, I'm right there with the project manager, with the construction manager, and with the engineer, reviewing the designs and seeing how they're put together and just asking in general questions. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a hydrologist. I'm not a water engineer. I've never built a levee, except for maybe when I was a kid with my Tonka trucks, and those always break. Right. The water always gets through, or something happens. Yeah. I'm not there to be an engineer, and I'm not there to be the construction manager. I'm there to be the people's representative, and I think the skills that I have with the accounting help get the questions answered to provide the sureties needed that the project that's on the table or on the plate is acceptable.
Oversight, just bird's eye view oversight of the whole thing.
Absolutely.
All right, so he touched on kind of the day-to-day things that the NRD is kind of looking at and overseeing. What are some of the lesser-known issues that can come up with your potential position?
Well, very important to me is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And a couple of the issues that have affected the board in the past, certainly the biggest one is bond funding. And bond funding had a 10-year run. I think they've spent about $77 million building a couple of dams.
Wow.
The most recent one was Flanagan Lake. And a couple over more closer to my area are Wearspan and Queen.
Where's that at?
Sarpy County.
Okay.
Prairie Queen as well.
Got it.
And there's a couple of other spots that are being purchased, land's being purchased right now.
How many million?
About 77 million.
77 million. Is that typical?
Well, let's talk a little bit of history of the NRD.
Yeah.
Back in 1968, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had designated 21 dam sites to build out in order to help prevent flooding. So flooding doesn't just affect us. The water that comes from us and from the states above us and around us, they also affect the states below us. Right. So it's kind of like your neighbor. I mean, if you're emptying your pool out at the end of the year, do you dump it in the street, or do you let it rush into your neighbor's yard and,
Right.
you know, damage their yard? So there's really this, we got to be good stewards and good neighbors to the states that are surrounding us. And we can prevent flooding, and sure, we could build walls and make sure it never happens here. And then we're basically just handing the damage down to our neighbors below us.
There's a lot of using the word state and farm. Or no, you said state and neighbor, and State Farm will probably show up now in all the recommended videos on YouTube. But yeah, sorry, continue. I know I got you off track a little bit.
So we were kind of talking a little bit about the bond funding, and is that a lot that they spent?
Right.
But I want to put things into perspective as government tries to take care of the people. We've gone through in Sarpy County and Douglas County significant growth in the last 20 years. In fact, I've lived in the house I've lived in since 2002. When I looked out my backyard, there were fields with whatever that prairie grass is that waves when the wind blows, beautiful summer, and now it's all houses.
Yeah.
I would drive on a dirt road to get to the Walmart off 180th and Center.
Would you really?
And
Wow.
it's all paved now, and there's so much more expansion. So let's talk about that. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, 1968, 67, 68, came up with 21 dam sites. So imagine if they would have built them then, and imagine building it at $1968 value and the cost per acre versus the cost per acre now in Douglas and Sarpy County skyrocketing.
Sure.
And we're talking about farm fields here is what we're talking about. The cost per acre of the agricultural land skyrocketing, and as development expands further and further, specifically in Sarpy County. So that has to do with a lot of the bond funding right now and why it's so expensive. It's not completely the dam, it's actually buying the land in order to build the dam or the reservoir area or to put the levee on. If we could have gotten it done in 1968, we would be a lot better off. But who can predict that far into the future?
No one has a crystal ball.
So that's some of what we have to deal with now. And I know last year the state legislature, the 10-year bond funding was about to sunset, and they gave it another 5-year span. So what does this mean? It means my kids are in debt for another 20 to 30 years, paying off what we did now. That's another reason why I have to run, why I feel inclined to run.
Sure.
And this is a sacrifice of time from my family. The NRD doesn't pay. It's
not at all.
a very down ballot.
I didn't know that.
Most people don't even know what the NRD does,
Right.
if they even know it exists. So that's one of the reasons I'm running, is not to promote me, but really is now my kids have, and I have, a 20 to 30 year loan that we have to pay off. And these decisions have to be made. How do we spend the bond funding, and how much in debt do we go? And what is the benefit for going this far into debt?
Wow. Yeah, I wouldn't have even thought about any of this. So I'm very glad I'm having you on and talking about this, because my knowledge of your position, still I feel like every word that comes out of your mouth, I'm learning more and more about what the NRD does. What are some other lesser known issues that can come up with this position? Because I feel like when I think of, when you first explained, you said you're running for the NRD, I was thinking, that doesn't seem really relevant for a city, for Omaha. But then as we were kind of talking off camera before we started, you mentioned, well, the Missouri River and this other river, I forget what you were saying, is like the largest.
So the Papio, Missouri
The Papio,
watershed,
Missouri.
is the most flood-prone watershed in middle America.
Wow.
And it's simple because
Why do we not know that? Well, I feel like growing up here, I've lived here my whole life. I feel like that should have been some statistic or something in history class that I read about.
Well, it's one less thing you really have to worry about, because the NRD has done a significant benefit expanding some of the creeks, building some of the levee systems that we do. But you talk about the NRD and rural benefits, and it certainly has that. A couple of the core principles for the NRD is flood control, soil erosion, and that can even be soil erosion by the wind blowing your earth away or onto your neighbors. Like the Great Dust Bowl, all the dry earth getting blown away. And then ultimately, so flood control is soil erosion and water quality.
which is a big issue in Omaha.
All of our streets drain into some form of a reservoir, like White Hawk out by me, or Lake Zarinsky. Those are all runoff areas for our street. And I can't remember the specific term, but basically the first half inch of rain washes off the oil from the leftover from the cars. You know, some of the...
Oh, that's gross.
Going straight into the water.
Yeah.
With obviously acceptable
Getting
levels of quality.
After this.
Don't drink the lake water, kids. Yeah. So NRD helps to plant trees, helps to share the cost of planting trees for farmers. Some of the benefits, obviously, are the farmers keep the land for the soil erosion, but also the trees act as a windbreak. So when the cows huddle together during the cold and during the winter, it helps keep them warm. So there is the rural benefit. But have you ever been down by Saddle Creek and Dodge, you know, that overpass? And in the winter, there's always a car floating because they don't know it just flooded or after a big rainstorm.
Yeah.
So very much that is a can't really be prevented in that area without significant dollars.
Sure.
But flooding happens in the city, and NRD is there to help prevent it. Imagine if Offutt flooded again.
Right.
How likely are we to have that landing strip rebuilt? At what point are the federal electeds going to come back and say, you know what, you guys haven't done good enough protecting the resource, which is Offutt,
right?
And so we're therefore going to move this to some other state.
What a huge loss! I couldn't imagine.
It's in the billions.
Oh,
it's in the billions.
With with all the employment, with the jobs, with the infrastructure. Huh.
Yeah, not just federal, but we've got civilians throughout Bellevue and Omaha that work there. So absolutely, the strategic benefits to having Offutt, the intelligence that Offutt gathers throughout all of the world. You know, we're it. We're kind of the big cheese.
We are, yeah.
And we've got
that's where the president flies, right? And he has a bunker allegedly.
Yes, he
for
does.
Doomsday out here.
Yes, he does.
Bellevue. So you're speaking earlier off camera as well. You were saying that the NRD is a nonpartisan position. Well, what is the reason for that? Is that just a dead end question right there? Because I'm curious. I guess I should have touched up on my local government 101 before interviewing you. But yeah, why is that a nonpartisan position?
You know, I really don't know the benefits of having a partisan position versus a nonpartisan. And actually, although I'm running for a political office, I'm not very political. We do talk at the dinner table about politics. And we do talk about the daily news topics, you know, things that are affecting us.
Sure.
But if you told me, you know, what person ran in 2016 against, I'm not that guy. You know,
same way.
I do review the unicameral and a majority of the legislative bills that as they're introduced for the first 21, 23 days in January. I do review those. But if something jumps out of a committee, I can't tell you all of them that do. I don't follow it that well. Like any person, like any of us, there are things that we care about more. You know, like do we save the turtles or do we save the whales? Maybe we save both. Maybe, you know, our heart is on for both of them. But ultimately, we kind of pick and choose the things that we care about. And the environment, I care about that. We only have to look to downtown Omaha and the damage that lead battery factory did.
What's that?
Oh, so we're the largest Superfund site from the EPA in America, because there was the lead factory, and and it polluted large areas of land.
Really?
Yeah. So
I didn't know that.
About in the early 2000s, Omaha, we became designated a Superfund, and so the federal government was providing dollars for contractors, and you had to get licensed to come in and start cleaning up neighborhoods and properties. And they're finding heavy levels of lead in the soil.
Okay.
And they found out that not just from the plant, but also from the whatever steam or smoke was coming out of the plant, and those clouds were also distributing that lead, which is why Rick's Boatyard Cafe is protected by 3 feet of concrete to protect the public from the land. It's cheaper to dump 3 feet of concrete than it is to, I guess, clean up the mess that we make.
Sure.
So I have a heart for the
Wow.
environment. I mean, we have to be good stewards of everything, not just the finances, but our resources, and taking care of the water quality. If we overpollute, if we use too much nitrogen, which is I think it's right now by Takema that they have heavy nitrogen levels in the water, and they're trying
from what?
Farming,
Okay.
and potentially over usage of nitrogen.
Gotcha.
The anhydrous ammonia, I think. But I'm not a farmer. Don't
Right.
quote me. I'm not a chemist.
Okay.
But
That go on record.
yes. Officially, I'm not. Although I speak like I know what I'm talking about sometimes. So that's why I'm running for the NRD, because I really do care about making sure the quality of water. I mean, if you go to Zirinsky, and there are people who go out there and fish, and as I asked the general manager for the Papio NRD, can you eat the fish? He said, yeah, but I probably wouldn't eat it like every single day.
That's a bad answer.
So
I would not eat it at all if that was the answer.
and that's the question. I mean, if you even have to question, what's in the water, isn't that a problem to begin with?
I think so.
But it's all about juggling these balls, and of course you got to understand that the water's got to go somewhere, and where does it go?
Right.
I mean, the watershed, the whole purpose of the watershed, which is a natural occurrence, is how does the water flow from snow and from rain, and where does it go? And it all goes into the Missouri.
Sure. Yeah, that's a reoccurring theme. It seems like watching out for your neighbors and making sure that you're kind of just doing the right thing. I like that. You brought that up several times now.
Well, a really good mentor of mine said it's just about people helping people. And he would donate his time to drive kids to the Shriners Hospital. And that's time and money and expense. It really is. It's about helping each other. And there's different levels of neighborhoods.
Right.
We're part of the greatest nation, but we're a union. How many states all together? And of course, Nebraska is the best one. But there's others downstream, and we've got to be able to protect them and do right by them as well. And of course, on the western part of Nebraska, there's water disputes potentially with bordering states as well. We just got to play nice.
Sounds like a really important position. Why do you think people like myself, and before I knew you, why do you think so many people don't know that this exists, don't know what NRD stands for, don't know the day-to-day tasks or day-to-day issues that the NRD position faces? Is it just lack of knowledge of local politics overall, or what do you think it is?
Well, I would hope that everybody gets involved with politics to some degree. And again, it all has to do with do you love the turtles or the whales kind of philosophy. Perhaps your love is, hey, I've got to focus on the county. Maybe about 10 years ago, there was a discussion whether fire truck should have 2 firefighters or 3 firefighters. We
When
are.
was that? I don't remember that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Well, because it all comes down to funding.
Sure.
And what's the level of safety? As my son and I, and mostly I started reading The Republic by Plato. And in The Republic, he's trying to figure out, and during the course of this festival, and it's days-long festival, he meets with other intellects, and he's at odds with one, and they're kind of having this dispute, and this dispute lasts perhaps more than a couple of days as they lay out their arguments for each other.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they're trying to see, is it better to be just or unjust?
Seems like should be a 2-second argument.
Should be, but they make really compelling arguments. Either way, highly intellectual people, and you've got one of the things that they're doing as they're trying to figure out, is it best to be just or unjust, is they build a city, and from the ground up, and they talk about, okay, so now that we have merchants, we have to have people who bring the products in. Now that we have this, we got to take protection. because now we have this marketplace, we have to protect it, so now we have to have an army.
Mm-hmm.
But now the people, we need entertainment as well. So they really build it from the ground up.
Interesting. I've heard of the book. I've never read it.
It's long,
I
but it's worth it.
Yeah.
Audio, get it on audio.
Okay, true.
Get it on audio. But ultimately, I think we're at a good spot right now with the division that we are in America, and basically split 50-50 ideologically, to kind of decide, how do we want our county run, and what services do we really need? How do we want Omaha to run? How do we want Nebraska, and how do we want the country run? Right. And that's kind of what we're seeing defined right now in this push and shove match. Is one side wants it ran this way, and another side wants to take it in a different direction. That's another reason that gets me onto the NRD board, and why I've got to step up. If I can change the famous quote by Edmund Burke, the only thing for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. And I'm going to change.
I've heard that before. I love that.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I'm going to change it just a little bit. Is that the only thing for the opposing argument to do to win is for you to do nothing, and that's why I've gotten involved. Mm-hmm. We were talking a little bit about some of the unknown facts or not widely popularized facts of the NRD. One of those is eminent domain. That 11-member board can confiscate land. They can do eminent domain.
11-member? Okay.
And that's a scary thing to me, when you've got farmers who have been out on their farms for generations, and you're saying, well, for the good of these people, I need to confiscate your land. We'll probably give you fair market value. I mean, they're decent. Again, we're all just neighbors here. We're all helping each other out. But I'm going to take your land because I think this is going to serve the people better. So eminent domain is a very serious thing.
It is, yeah.
And for me, I'm all about limited government, individual accountability. And a person who might be an opposing political party is typically about bigger government. Mm-hmm. And it's typically about government management and government, oversight. Letting the people oversight. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So you want me there, you want me on that board helping to prevent eminent domain. But it's not just eminent domain like that we're going to take your land. Simply by saying we're going to build a dam in this site where, John Smith owns property, almost condemns it. It almost prevents them from being able to sell it to whomever or whatever. Because if I'm coming in and I'm going to be buying a piece of property and it's possible that it could be confiscated by the government, I'm not going to do it.
Right, yeah.
No
one would.
So eminent domain passively and actively.
So with eminent domain, I remember hearing, it seems like all growing up, but I know it couldn't have been that long, the pipeline. Does that eminent domain play a part in that as well, I'm sure?
I will follow, so the NRD kind of represents NRCC.
NRCC is?
Nebraska Resources, Nebraska Resources Council. It's kind of like the parent company almost, if you will, and we're a subsidiary. They have wisely decided, because the Keystone pipeline is not in their purview, therefore they don't have a dog in the fight, to not comment and let those parties that are dealing with it deal with it, because it's been going on for almost a decade, I believe.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's gone through several administrations. It's and again, I'm going to do the same gracefully and learning how to be a politician.
Sure.
I'm not going to take any position on that. But again, I think if it threatens, and the NRD that I represent, the Pepperell, Missouri, doesn't cover that area as well.
Right.
So it's again like me commenting on my neighbor's yard or my neighbor's house.
Cut your grass.
Yeah. So, but if it did have to do with water quality, I think perhaps maybe the NRD could make a case that they have some sort of. But in the end, do we really want more government making more decisions?
Sure.
So I'm glad they're staying out of it, and it's a conundrum as it is with the different entities that are responsible for it, and of course we're also dealing with Canada, so and their government institute. So yeah,
that's a perfect transition-ish, not Canada. But one of my favorite things to talk about with all of my guests is Omaha. Omaha as a city, Omaha as an expanding city. Eminent domain can potentially come into play when, I'm going to butcher the numbers, I think it's $180 million expansion to I-80 was just announced about a month ago. That would come into play, I would imagine, but would that be above NRD? Like, where would that land in terms of eminent domain if they say, okay, for another however wide lanes are that they need to widen, if people's property line up on there, they'd have to take away some of their property, I would imagine, with these interstate expansions and
Certainly.
changes happening. So who governs that, or is that something beyond the state, since it's a Interstate 80 rather than like 480 or 680?
Again, I think that mostly would deal with the National Department of Transportation,
Okay,
along with the state Highway Department of Roads.
Sure. That makes sense.
Perhaps if there was a portion of it, depending on how much they want to expand it, perhaps if there was a portion of it that crossed a river, there could be a purview that NRD makes some sort of recommendations. But ultimately, I think they would more than likely not to be brought to the table.
Okay. Yeah, probably the department. That makes sense. Okay. But what are your thoughts on Omaha expanding? I mean, it kind of brings up tax issues. As we keep expanding, that takes a lot of infrastructure. Like you said, power lines, pavements, trash. Well, we outsource the trash here.
Oh, yeah.
But what are your thoughts? Is Omaha in a good position doing all this expansion? Our favorite word is district. We redo a block or a building and it's the new Flatiron district or the new Blackstone district. We slap on district everywhere. But is that going to ever come back to hurt us, or should we keep building up? What are your thoughts on Omaha's current growth phase that we're in?
Well, there's a couple things that will cause me a bit of concern, and simple that the Industrial Revolution brought farmers into the city.
Mm-hmm.
And as we continue to tax the heck out of our farmers here in Nebraska, they're struggling as well. So I can see farmers continuing, the few that are out there, shutting down the farms, or unfortunately perhaps even going through bankruptcy, selling to commercial, and that's okay. But again, coming back into Omaha and metropolitan areas in order to find jobs for their family. And absolutely, I could see that happening. The concern simply is just, I love history. I love downtown. I love old buildings. I worked for .com, Douglas Omaha Technology Commission.
Okay.
And so we were in a building that they wanted to tear down to build the new juvenile corrections facility.
Very highly contested issue.
18th and Hardy. I love that building. It used to be a bank. So, you've got a large vault on the first ground floor. You can still see the tin ceilings. They've got a huge freight elevator, which they said Wells Fargo would take the old wagons and the early armored cars up to the 6th floor. I absolutely believe in redevelopment. I understand that you can build higher, bigger, newer technology is safer. It also has energy savings as well. Mm-hmm. But I just love that history, the nostalgia of it.
Right.
So Omaha is beautiful. I came from California, from Fresno. I moved to Nebraska in 1996, so I've definitely been adopted here to Nebraska. I don't want to live anywhere else.
It's good to hear.
Which, again, is another reason why I have to run and try to influence the government in the ways that I think our community wants. Our property taxes are crazy. Everybody agrees. Nobody's disagreeing with that. Mm-hmm. And that has a couple of effects. Is one, the retirees that can or technically can't afford to stay move out. Mm-hmm. And those also who can't afford to stay, also have to stay. My in-laws potentially could move out, but they have grandkids here. So one is I do want to help with property tax and help reduce that and make those financial decisions, to consider, well, do we spend the money now in $1968, or do we wait until 2040 when the prices are doubled or tripled to build these dam sites, these reservoirs or levees? Mm-hmm. Those are the tough decisions that have to be made, and I'm wanting to be one of those people who helps represent my community to make those decisions. But the second thing is I have kids, and kids are growing up, and at some point I want them to stay too. And so the NRD can help.
They gotta take care of you.
Recreational. Yeah, I know. That's what we do joke. It's like, all right, man, we're taxed out so much, so once I get it fixed, I'm going to rely on you for at least some sort of, maybe put me in the garage. Let's remodel the garage or something. Yeah, so I want the NRD with building these water retention areas like Zarinsky.
Mm-hmm.
It does give the younger generation a place to, touch nature, to be in a spot kind of away from the hustle and bustle that we're so used to. And NRD can do both. I can help keep the grandparents here near the grandkids, and I can help my kids stay near to me. Mm-hmm. And I think families all across the county, all across the whole NRD, are faced with the same thing.
You touched on, we keep going back to tax dollars, but Omaha's really weird. I was just meeting with a client the other day, and they moved here also from California, but they're already looking to move to Phoenix. Like everyone from Omaha loves, everyone from Nebraska loves every place in Arizona. But they were saying when they moved here, they got a house way bigger than they needed because it was so much more affordable. I don't think it was Fresno. I forget where it was in California, mm-hmm. But regardless, they go, it was way more affordable. They go, but we realized that was quickly offset by your guys' taxes here. Yes. And so it's just interesting that the taxes are, I don't know, Omaha's very well known for our low cost of living, our low standard of living, along with being a 20-minute city. But because things are so affordable here, people will kind of overextend and maybe buy a bigger house that they need or a more expensive car that they need, only then to get taxed way more than they anticipated. Then it kind of evens out. So that's just a fascinating thing that came up recently in my life that I saw, a real life example of the taxes.
Yeah, my family that still lives out in California could easily sell their house and come out here and buy close to next to a mansion. I mean, it is ridiculous. We got to help prevent that.
Yeah.
The absurdity of the real estate pricing out there. Again, keep our Western values, our Midwestern values. How much do we need? And it goes back to the Republic in the book by Plato. Now would be a great time for both parties of Douglas County, of Omaha City, to kind of sit together and be like, what do we really want? Because it isn't just about my party, and it isn't just about my ideas. We do have to live together and work together.
Right.
And they have good ideas as well. It all needs to just come to the same table. Maybe, in fact, we need to be at a round table or eat together, break bread together to decide, what do we need? Do we need 2 or 3 firemen? What else do we need? Can we as private citizens help help the climate in whatever ways we can? More buses, better cars, more motorcycles.
Yeah, what do you think about orbit?
It's needed. I don't like the legislative bill that came out that created a new transit authority, basically, between Sarpy and Douglas. I'm not sure why the two couldn't work together.
Oh, they did. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's another new taxing authority. I kind of have mixed feelings.
Sure.
It's a necessity for some. I'm not saying that I want to give up, my car, but I'm seeing that in some points, maybe close in the future, that it's kind of crazy that I drive around a 2,000-pound vehicle for myself. Why cars haven't gotten smaller. Right. And of course we worry about, I don't want to be that small car against a Suburban or a Tahoe
truck, yeah.
or an F-150, and I understand that, but really, I think we do need to start deciding now. How we have it is how it had been created for us. How do we want to see it in the future?
Mm-hmm. Are you a proponent? So you said you love keeping Omaha beautiful, which it is. Like all the historic, essentially all downtown, especially the old market is amazing.
There's an energy down there. I love it.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's so unique. It's an energy that you can't find in other downtowns. Most downtowns are not old brick buildings and brick streets. They've definitely been repaved, but definitely is a total different vibe. that brings about, though, a shift in, like you said, just kind of demographics and the whereabout people are living. It attracts more people away from the smaller towns and away from the farmers. And do you want to touch on that at all? I guess, do you like the redevelopment that's going on? Are you excited to see any one district in particular that you like going to, or?
Well, like
do you think it's a relief for property taxes too? Because my brain keeps thinking about that. Where as Omaha, sorry, totally cut you off, but as Omaha continues to expand further west, you get suburbs, right? You get replicated houses over and over, cookie cutter houses that have pretty decent sized lots. And they're going to strip malls with 5 tenants, or maybe even worse, one big like Walmart or Hy-Vee. And that's a very limited amount of people paying for property taxes when you get strip malls and big box stores. And as we bring people back to the city with all these redevelopments and districts, I think that could relieve taxes in a major way. And I don't think people are really realizing that.
Well, so that again kind of goes back to the Republic. What is the government that we want to have?
Are you endorsed by this book?
I know, right? Plato, thousands of years ago, said, "Man, you in the future." No, but really, that's the beauty that we have. That's what makes America exceptional. Mm-hmm. We can change it.
Yeah.
It isn't set in stone, and we have the ability to advance it in a direction that we feel as we vote is a benefit to us. With Nebraska expansion, one thing I don't like is government elected officials talk about the tax revenue and the revenue base. And well, look, if we're expanding in Douglas County or Sarpy County, we're going to be expanding our revenue base. Well, businesses should be expanding their revenue, mm-hmm. not government.
Right.
Government isn't in the business to expand their revenue and to say, "Oh, I'm going to help develop this." But, however, there is the natural progressive growth that cities and counties should have, mm-hmm. And I appreciate that. We have to compete. We have to compete against Texas. We have to be bringing the technology here. We are a major fiber backbone because of Offutt, because of SEC, mm-hmm. That we could be bringing the technology businesses here to Omaha. One thing I hear is that there's not a lot to do. So we are redeveloping the downtown area. And a couple of Saturdays ago, I was out past my bedtime at an event, and the energy, it was beautiful at 11:30. Actually, I think it was midnight.
Oh, okay.
It was midnight. I had checked in at home, made sure everything was safe, and let them know I was on my way. But it was beautiful, and I felt completely safe. Absolutely felt safe. So. It's not the role of the government to expand their revenue or grow like a business. They should be there to support people who say, you know what, I want to redevelop the downtown district. I think it can be vibrant, and because I'm doing this, I believe it's going to attract some of the younger generation that want to bring these tech jobs to Omaha. The same way with building out the suburban areas, and the quality of it. The NRD helps with that by building these water basins, by building these reservoirs and the walking trails. And I get it. It's not the NRD's direct purview to build trails and to do these things. However, if we can benefit, and I'd like to see a more private investments into some of these trails. And even or city funding. Whoever's going to benefit the most, whether it's a development or whether it is the city, I would like to see them bringing in their money, so we can tax less and look like the heroes, obviously. But no, I don't like the idea of government expanding their revenue base. But I do love the idea of trying to compete against Texas and all the people who are running from California and trying to go somewhere. Right. I do love the idea of Omaha being competitive to bring that market. And one of the ways we have to do that is to reduce the property tax. So those people who came here and love it here don't go and move out to Phoenix. Mm-hmm. So NRD can help both, and that's what I'd like to do when I get there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful kind of summation. It goes back to, again, what you keep saying. It's neighbors helping neighbors. It's the government working together with local development and local developers saying, hey, this will help everyone. It'll create a newer, fresher downtown while still maintaining the core Midwest values and the beautiful history that our city has. and it'll just kind of bring everyone together in a way that helps also then relieve taxes, and it's just a circle of logic in a way, where we look out for someone, and then just kind of is a domino or snowball effect of other people getting helped out.
Yeah, the tax relief really has to come down to the questions that the people have for their representatives. Again, we're a republic, and we elect our representatives. That means I should just be a microphone on the NRD board for what my constituents want. And hopefully they'll see the skills and abilities that I have as a benefit to the NRD, but ultimately I'm their microphone to represent them. And we got to decide, as we're electing people, one through the primaries on May 10th and in November 2nd through the general election, are these people going to go there and make our decisions effectively, accurately, represent us? But are they going to go in and look at those budgets and look at the programs and say, you know what, we don't need these things because we are overtaxing our people.
Sure.
And we're losing people to other states, and we don't want to do that, and we want to have this inflow. And I hope I trust the voter that we do choose wisely, that whoever we do put in there makes those decisions to reduce the taxes, to help us out, to help our neighbors out, and make Nebraska and Omaha and Douglas County a much better place to live.
Well, that's a very good way to put it, saying you're just going to be a microphone for how many constituents do you say that you have?
So the districts are broken down into roughly about 42,000.
Okay, wow. So then how does someone reach out to you? How do they, if they like what they're hearing too, how they, most importantly, of course, donate to your campaign, or how do they, even more importantly, actually express their concerns and help you be their voice? How can they get their opinions and their knowledge to you, so you can be that microphone?
Absolutely, I'd love to hear from you. So I do have a Facebook page active, Houlihan for NRD, and as well, we're almost done with construction. Again, I'm an accountant, not an IT guy, but we're almost done with votewithhoulihan.com.
Oh, love it.
So that'll be one way to be able to reach out to me to provide your ideas and your opinions and any feedback you have on what I've said today. I'd love to be your representative. If you live in District 9, Center Street over to Giles, and 132nd out to 204th Street.
It's such a large area. Well, thank you for being on, and I hope that many people do reach out and give you their feedback, because I know you're a very genuine guy, and just from many conversations that I have had with you, you are truly looking to bring out other people's voices, and you kind of just want to be a resource, pun intended with the name. You're trying to be the resource for obviously all of Douglas County and everyone you come across, but you're starting with this, and you're starting with the people in your jurisdiction. So thank you for coming on here, and I appreciate your time, James. Again, reach out to him on Facebook, online at the website. By the time this goes live, the website might be up. But thanks again for being here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.